everybody. I'm Leslie Anne Tarabella, and I'm a local author in Fairhope. And that's perfect because this video is about local authors in Fairhope. It's made by the Fairhope Public Library for their Authors Chat series, which is a great idea because Fairhope is overrunning with two things: cats and authors. If you come to Fairhope, you will adopt a cat or you will start writing a book. And since I'm a dog person, I started writing. So anyway, it's a great place to live. We've lived here for almost 22 years. My husband Bob and I moved here and we raised our two boys. And one of the first things we did was we took our boys to the story time at the Fairhope Public Library. We met the nicest moms and we met wonderful children that became friends with our children. And my youngest son was still just an infant. And so I would take him in a stroller and we would go and read books. And it's one way we just instilled a love of reading and books in our boys. So I encourage all the parents out there, if you're in town, whether you live here in Fairhope or another town, find a story time and go. It's just a great way to spend a nice afternoon. And nowadays with air conditioning, it's a great place to spend a hot summer day, is having someone read stories to your children while you sit with the other moms in the cool air. So there's that benefit too. I started writing about 8 years ago. And I first started with a blog, and I didn't really know what I was doing. My teenage son then set it up for me, and my friends in Georgia were the ones who encouraged me to start writing. And once again, you know, it's those friends around you that are the encouragers and that I'm so grateful for. So I started writing a blog, and the local newspaper, Fairhope Courier, contacted me and asked if I would write a column for them. And it turned into a weekly column for the Gulf Coast newspapers, and I had a blast. It was so much fun. And so after I wrote for them for about 3 years, then I moved over and started writing for AL.com newspapers, which covers Mobile, Birmingham, and Huntsville. And you can find my stories there at AL.com, or I'm in the Sunday print edition in the newspapers. You can look for me there. And newspapers are great things to have. You should, you know, with your cup of coffee and sitting there and reading that newspaper. It's a retro kind of hip thing. So y'all need to go subscribe to the paper again. But there is that online version for those of you who like that. But after I wrote for them for a few years, my readers started requesting a book. And one man even said, "I'll buy a package of copy paper if you'll just print out all your stories for me." And I said, "I think that's really called a book. So let me see what I can do." And so sure enough, once again, there were people there who encouraged me. And I put out my first book in November of 2017. And I just happen to have one here. Imagine that. It was called The Majorettes Are Back in Town. And you can find it now on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And also our local bookstore, Page and Palette, has it. So if you're in Fairhope, stop by and grab a copy there. And the other place you can get it is the Fairhope Public Library. Yay! So go check it out and look at it. It has sold very well. And I think the reason is that in this day and age, people want some way to escape. And my column in the Sunday paper is not hard news. It is something to distract you from the hard news. The scary, big world things are all on the front page. I'm back where the softer things are. And you know, it's things like remembering your favorite dish that grandmother cooked for you, or talking about the first day you took your child to kindergarten and how it ripped your heart out to walk away and leave them. You know, things like that. They're nice to think about, but it's not going to stress you out. And a lot of people have liked it as a gift because they know it's clean. They're not going to offend the person they give it to. So anyway, that was the first book. And now, big drum roll, I have my second book coming out any week now, a few weeks from now, probably in October or the 1st of November of 2020. And the big reveal for the new book cover is here, Exploding Hush Puppies. And the cover will look something like this. We're not really sure exactly what it will look like, but something like this. But isn't that cute? Doesn't it make you want to go out and buy just 20 copies all at once? Yay! But Exploding Hush Puppies is probably going to be the first story in the book. And once again, it's a compilation. Each story will take you 5 minutes to read. You can pick it up, put it down, come back to it later. But the Exploding Hush Puppies is about my family getting together and cooking hush puppies at my grandmother's house one time. And too many cooks were in the kitchen and they all added the baking powder and hush puppies started exploding everywhere. And so it's just, that's the kind of story, you know, it is in the book. It's hard to say. But anyway, when I agreed to do this video for Fairhope Library, we were going to do it at the library, but the hurricane kind of got in the way. So we're in my house now. This is my house. This is a snake that my son made at the Eastern Shore Art Center years ago that I just love. So I keep him on my shelf. And there you go, full tour of my house, the snake. But anyway, my readers on the blog wrote in and gave me questions they wanted me to answer. And most of them are about writing. There was one about baton twirling, so I'll save that for last. Maybe I won't have time for that. The first question I got was, what is your method of writing and what is your process? Which I think is a very good question because all creative people have a different way of operating. You know, a lot of people who write like to do it in the middle of the night. Personally, I like to sleep in the middle of the night, so I don't really do that. But I have a MacBook that I carry with me everywhere, and it's small enough to stick into my handbag. I just carry a really big handbag so I can carry my computer around with me. But I do all of my writing there. And the hardest part to me about writing, especially when you have a weekly column going on, is coming up with the idea. Once I get the idea in my head, then I can write and get it out quickly. And it's not so hard to do. But the thinking of the story and planning the attack you want to take is hard. And when I speak to teenagers with writing, you know, it's hard to tell them this, but writing is all about delivering the story. And some people are good storytellers and others aren't. You know, you could have 100 children in the lunchroom and someone could come running in, screaming, throw their tray in the air, food goes everywhere. And some of those children would go home and their parents would say, well, what happened at school today? And they would say, nothing. They don't tell the story. Or they'd say, some kid went wild in the lunchroom today. End of story. But other children will take it and run with it. They will give you details and they will give you background, and then they'll make up some things too. And so those are good storytellers. And so that's what you've got to do is if you want to write is you have to really think about how would I tell my friend about what just happened? And so that's a fun way of looking at it. But another question, let's get to another question, is when did you first realize you had a gift or interest in writing? It never just dawned on me like a big beam out of the sky and one day, you know, I just decided I wanted to write. I've always enjoyed it. Like I just told you, at first I didn't really have good ideas because I just hadn't lived an interesting life, I guess. But I had taught school for years, and so I wrote for educational journals for a while, which those are kind of dry and dull anyway. But I go back and I look at them sometimes and I think, this is terrible. I mean, I was awful. So you get better at everything you do, whether you're a painter or whatever it is you do, you're always going to grow and get better, thank goodness, you know. So when I was in school, I loved my English teachers and they were all very encouraging. I loved my college English classes, but I never thought of having it as a career. So my senior teacher, my senior year of high school, Mrs. Gross, gave me a writing award, and it was a big deal to me, but yet I still kind of downplayed it. And I think part of that is just being a young girl. You know, I thought, oh, she just did it because I'm a good kid and I turned my homework in on time. You know, I didn't really see my gift. And she was trying to point that out. So I think it's important for boys and girls when they're young, if you see a gift in them, no matter what it is, encourage that and bring that to their attention, because you never know, it may steer them down a different path, but it may lead them to something they didn't really think about. So it's just a good process, and yay for teachers for being encouraging. Thanks, Miss Grace. Let's see, one friend asked, a reader said, and sometimes, you know, I'll call them friends. On my blog, I get comments from people all over, and I even have a few in England that write, and I think a few in Canada, but many of them I've never even met. Some of them will come to Fairhope, and if I feel safe, I'll go meet them for coffee sometimes, but some of them I know from here in town, but others I don't know at all. And you can leave a comment under a different name. You don't even have to use your real name. And I think I caught my mom leaving comments once. I figured out it was her. This sounds like my mom. And so I never know who's commenting. But a lot of my readers I've just never even met. I don't know their last names or anything, or even if they're using their real names. So it's very interesting. I get to be online friends with people. but I have very loyal readers, and they're all just wonderful, sweet people. So one of them said, how do you commit to keep writing even when you're not in the mood? Well, that is helped because I write for a newspaper, and you've got a deadline, and you have to get that deadline in because they will be waiting for your story. And, you know, I've tried to pull the old trick of, oh, my dog ate my story, and it doesn't really go over. And I met Jan Karen once, who wrote the Mitford series, and she was fabulous, and I just love her. And I told her one time, I said, well, I've only missed 3 deadlines in all these years writing. And she said, why'd you miss 3? And I said, well, I was sick and I was traveling. She said, you need to have extra on hand. I mean, she kind of fussed at me. And I thought, she's right. You know, she is right. So I feel very guilty when I miss a deadline. But because my stories are the lighthearted side, they're not hard journalism, they're not the hard news that scares people. When things are scary out in the world and I'm just kind of overloaded with sadness, it's hard to come up with a happy idea. And when people are rioting and people are, you know, sad and dying of this pandemic, it's hard for me to write a story about my favorite hamburger I've ever eaten. So I really have to be careful and be aware of balance between bringing distraction and happiness to people and being the overkill, you know, happy girl with fairy dust everywhere, because that's irritating even to me. So it's an interesting, fun job, and I love it. Another question is, do you keep a pad of thoughts or ideas or themes for the future? And how long does it take you in general? That's a good question. And I do keep a list on my computer once again, and I'll start a little story, even if it's just a few lines, just to keep that idea and I can go back to it later. Some stories, I love to work on stories for a month because then I can comb through them and edit. But a lot of times, not a lot, but a few times, I've come up with a story the day it's due, and I'm flying, and my fingers are flying, and I get it in that day. But then when it's in the paper, I'm thinking, oh, I should have said this a different way. So it helps if you can do it ahead of time because you can really plan. And that's one thing I was going to talk to you about is a lot of people who write find the writing easy, but they forget to edit. And that's another thing I've learned from a newspaper is that even though I'm a very wordy person, whether you've noticed that or not, it's hard for me to take a story that I would tell you in probably 30,000 words and narrow it down to 750 words, which is what my word count was when I first started writing for the paper. It was very hard for me. And then once I got the hang of it, they switched it up and had the nerve of reducing it to 550 words. So it's very hard, but what happened is after I got over the shock of it, I think my writing actually got better, because what happens with writing is the more you take out, the more that main idea comes through. And you have to ask yourself, what is my main idea? What am I trying to say? And I think the reader appreciates that because it gets to the point of things. Another one of my favorite writers is Mary Kay Andrews, and she writes romance novels, which I love the romance part, but I also love that her background was in journalism, and she wrote for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and that comes through in her stories. And she's really taught me get to the main idea. And she never rambles on and on unless it's in the character's personality to be a rambler. But she really gets to the heart of the story, and she packs a lot into each and every page. So that's a good thing, is if you like to write, just try to remember to go back and edit as much as possible. I love being here with you, and I love that you're going to be coming to the Fairhope Public Library to read. And they will have a copy of my new book, I hope. And if you follow me on my blog, leslieannetarabella.com, you'll see announcements for the book release party, which you're all invited to. I'm hoping to have it at our local bookstore in the next few months before Christmas sometime. And you can stay posted on all of my stories are listed there. You can see them. And I'd just love to hear from all of you. And if you're a creative writer, go for it. It's just a great hobby to have, and it's led to a job for me and some books. So you never know what's going to happen. And I just wish you all the best of luck, and stop by and see the Fairhope Public Library sometime. Thanks, guys. Bye.